Okay, so I got a couple things from the kiln, which turned out really nicely. These are those slip cups that I dunked and then wiped off. So you can see the slip trail on the surface, and then this was dunked in Shino. So there's a lot of color even coming through the pinholes on the slip, right? So that was the white B clay slip over the Baco red clay. So it was a little bit of a lighter firing that we had this time. So the Shino was a little bit more bleached out, and the coppers were as well. But some examples for people to look at. And we also tested green slip. So we have a nice green, it looks like it's black in this shot right here. So come up and take a look at it, because it's done on some really interesting things. The glaze really fluxed out the color of it. So it's almost two different tones between the unglazed and the glazed surface. So we got a nice green now that adds to the effect, which is really kind of just a ceramic nerd thing. This is an oxidation. This was in our test kiln. These were fired in our gas kilns. So we have different effects even at levels of oxidation. The glaze comes out completely different in reduction than oxidation, right? So if people are interested in a green slip, we got that.
And you just put a clear glaze over it.
A clear glaze over it, yep. So this has that Shainer's clear over it, which almost blues it out a little bit. But it's a really nice stable green. So that's good. And then this little guy is that Iowa clay that I showed you guys earlier in the semester. So this is thrown, right? And glazed with that clear on the inside. So the iron in the clay also affects the color of the glaze. It makes it a little bit sky blue. So come up and take a look at this if you're interested. I've been working quietly on tests and things like that with the different like unprocessed clays and like naturally dug clays. So we'll have a little section on that next week on Tuesday. So we'll go over the different clay bodies, and I'll give you guys little bits of clay to fool around with, and we'll kind of talk about that work. And so that Tuesday will be a good lead into the presenters that we'll have in class on the screen, talking about their work and how they process clay and things like that. So this is really exciting to have a clay body that goes to our top temperature that doesn't really need to be processed. So all these iron pits and things that melted at temperature, you get these little iron spits and burnouts and some really nice coloration on the inside. So come up and take a look at this if people are interested, right? It's a really fun thing, right? I mean, clay all comes from the ground anyway. It's just highly processed at the commercial level, right? So this is a whole vein of work in ceramics that people are digging and processing their own clay, and it's wild stuff what people are doing with it. Right? So any questions so far about things? Great. So we will get to big reveal. Not that big, right? But we'll work with section pots today. People know what section pots are?
That big one over there.
Yes, right, so
Hold it flat for you.
Jack was miming it. What are section pots, Jack?
Like throwing bits and pieces of a pot on the wheel, connecting it.
Right.
Bigger stuff, right?
Yeah, so it's a great way to build on things. Get just a little bit. I get 5 minutes. So, you know, people are struggling with. You're fine. If people struggle with throwing with 10 pounds, you can throw 5 pounds each and then flip it up and connect the two together, kind of like building a coil pot, except you have 2 large coils. And the tool that we need are these calipers. So we'll throw take a measurement and throw the exact size to make these fit. So what I did before class today, my homework was throwing this bottom, and I dried it out a little bit. So a good test is if I can wiggle the rim and it moves a little bit, but it still keeps its shape. So I threw it, I put it in front of the fan, and I want to take a measurement from outside edge to outside edge. So these calipers will do that for me, right? And then I'll keep this measurement. So the fun thing with these calipers is that these will measure the outside edge from the inside, and this side will measure the outside edge from the outside. So if you're doing lids, this is the way to take measurements. But I just want to have one measurement from the inside, and we'll keep this like that. Right now we'll throw a bowl to match this. I got my clay.
Just out of curiosity, how long did you have that?
About 20 minutes. So I'll turn it, like I'll rotate it. It'll be in front of the fan for like 10 minutes, and then I'll rotate it. So ideally, you'll want to have both of these in front of the fan to have them firm up. We'll see what happens with this. For demonstration purposes, it'll work just fine. So this is going to be the top. This is 5 pounds. I threw the other half with 6 pounds because I need to have the bottom, right? So with the top, I'll always take off a couple pounds. So you could throw the top with 4 pounds, because what we're gonna do is open all the way to the wheel head. Right? We won't have a bottom on here. So we'll make another bowl. And when I'm throwing these, when I'm centering, I'll generally want to keep the same size on the base here. And this is one of those tricks that I've just learned as I've worked, right? I've mentioned this several times, but if I measure from the wheel head to the top in finger widths, the other mound of clay that I centered was 3 finger widths in height. And so this one is measured in 3 finger widths of height, right? Helps keep things even. And then we'll open all the way to the bottom, okay? Because we're gonna connect the 2 together on the rim here. And then when this is flipped, the bottom is gonna be the top. I'll open wide enough so I can fit my hand in, which will be really important. You'll see why, right? And then begin pulling up. So it's just like you want to throw 2 wide bowls and then attach them together. Get that wire out of the way. There we go, much better. I don't want to throw my bowl too wide because collaring my bowl in sometimes is a little difficult. So what I can do is take a measurement, right? I always want to stretch my halves to meet each other. So this is looking pretty good. I'll do another pull. And I won't pull any more than I need to, right? This is just to get a little bit more height to it. And if I have a lot of clay on the base with this one, that's all right. Because when we flip it over, we can throw the other side. Okay. So I don't want to make this too thin because it will not be as structurally sound. Make sure I get my water all out. And then I can start stretching this. So I want to take my throw rings off and the slit because it'll tighten up the surface. Using my rib, pressing on the base. And moving upwards, so just a rib throw. Takes off that slit, right? So when using these metal ribs, I don't know if I've mentioned, these can cut you. It's like the worst paper cut you've ever had in your life. So just be careful of working with these, especially if you're pulling the clay through like this, you can cut your thumb, right? So be careful. And now we'll begin stretching this out, which I don't really have too far to go. Well, I'll start at my base. And then just work my way up, just lightly. And this is just kind of one of those guess and check. So just about there. And if I'm fine tuning this, I don't need to go all the way down to the bottom. I can just start up at the top or close to the top. And that's pretty good. So because the rim has been soaked with water, I want to cut that ring off because it's too soft. So I'll go down about 1/4 inch and remove that top because this is really soaked with water and this is not. So I'll have more support here than if I had this. It'll, you know, when you flip this over and connect the two, it'll squish out. Great, so now this, we'll double check my measurement. It just needs to be stretched out a little bit more. And that'll work, right? So outside edge from the inside to outside edge. And what I want to do is, because I have my bat, I can use my serrated rib. And make my score marks. Sometimes it's hard to get this bat off, so I just want to take your time with it. Some of these bats are just really close to the edge of the wheel head, so it just makes it difficult. So from here, I'll set this guy behind me, and I'll take my dried one, right? We'll double check my measurement, and that looks like it's pretty right on the money. And sometimes the bat is a little funky. The bat pins will sometimes be a little off, or the holes will be a little off. So just make sure when you put your piece back on, it's on center, right? If it's not, pick up your bat and switch it around. But this looks good. And then add my score marks. And go back and forth, it'll create some zigzags. I'll also flatten out my rim that way. We'll make a nice connection. So we have all this really great throwing slip in the splash pan, and that'll work really great as the slip to connect these, right? So I just want to add it on one side. And then we're ready to join these together. So normally I would let this one sit in front of the fan for a little bit, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to move ahead, right? So this is really, wiggly, right? I'll always wiggle my rim if it doesn't move, but it's still soft. That's a good test, right? This will move a lot with that, right? So I'll turn this over and we'll put it together, right? So just by looking at where things line up, 3 points like here and then on the sides, I can generally line this up all the way around, right? So this measurement is really important, right? To have that, because this lined up really well, right? It's kind of like taking a big breath and then flipping your pot over. It's just so it makes sure it doesn't, collapse on you. And I want to cut my bat off. So with my wire pulling through, and it doesn't have to be an even cut. Like this is really uneven, but we'll even that out with throwing and shaping. So I got my two sides here, and with the wheel going slowly, I just want to press in anything that's a little out of whack. Like if, say, this spot here is a little overhang, I can push it in and line it up with the side here. And we'll close the seam together. Right? And the tool that I really like using, is these soft rubber ribs, or even the wood rib works really well on the side for shaping. So I'll go back and forth. I'll support the inside with my finger and then press on the outside. And then that tension will connect that together, right? So, making a coil pot with two giant coils, right? So I have a little bit of extra clay on the inside, and I'll go back and forth. So I'll shape the inside with this curved edge. And this will just kind of take the clay out that doesn't need to be there. Right, so just that little bit of slip. It's a lot of back and forth to get this in place. Then we can begin with the shaping throw from here. So pressing from the inside out, you can bring my little jar together, right? Now I can really begin shaping this. So this is where the fun really kind of happens. So I'll start with my base, using my wood rib I'll press out and just take my time with it and just kind of set this up for shaping. And I'll stop about 3/4 of the way up the pot, because I want to bring this in a little bit. So we'll finish up the base and then continue on with the top, right? So I can put my left hand in and feel where the bottom is. And then with my wood knife, I can take away the clay that I don't need. Okay, so just kind of trimming up the base, cleaning things up a little bit. And I always like this little curved edge here. So I'll angle this a little way, press into the side of my pot, and then bring that wall out to meet it. So I have a nice curve to start from. And then from here, I can shape things up a little bit more. I think bringing this out just a little bit to give some more volume would be really nice. And the reason why I can stretch this so much is because that it has been in front of the fan. If it was really wet, I wouldn't be able to do this. And to clean up the outside, I'll always come back with my straight rib and add pressure from the inside. And it really cleans things up. Okay. So this is where the back and forth happens. The bottom's kind of all taken care of, and we'll focus our time on the top now. This is definitely one of those practice things, right? So wetting my sponge, getting it fluid on the outside and inside. So the base is relatively thick when I flip this over, and we'll use that to our advantage. And pull this together. I'm not worried about the top so much. You can always clean that up. I just want to have a nice even top. Right, so I'll go back down here and begin collaring again with my fingertips. My fingertips on the inside are still a little bit more raised than my fingertips on the outside. And as I move through, I can go back and forth. And I want to make sure that I can still fit my hand in. I want to shape my vase a little bit more. All right, and bring out shoulder a little bit. Come back a little bit down to the bottom. Kind of round things out. And with this, you can see this hump, right? This hump here is that clay where I put the seams together. It's just squishing out a little bit. So there's just going to be a little bit more clay there, which you can trim off with your large trimming tool if you want, but it's really not necessary if you come back through and clean up that side with your rib. So using my straight edge of the rib, I can clean up that side. I'll begin collaring things in a little bit more with my rib. So with this guy, I'll spend some time on the shoulder, bringing this in, really digging in with my edge and moving upward. And this is where my fingertips will switch, where my outside will be higher than my inside, and that's what will drive things up. So for demo purposes, kind of coming to a close here. And what I want to do is I'll finish it with my metal rib, just because it gets some really nice sharp marks. Right, so not worried about my top, because I can trim that off. Okay, so that'll flatten it. If I add just a little bit of water and use my handy dandy plastic, can smooth up the rim really nicely. So some people use a chamois. I just like using a piece of plastic. Right? You can cut out a rectangle, fold it over. So this is turned into a pretty nice little jar. I think I'll add a little rib right there. And how I like to finish this is this edge on the metal rib is really sharp. So I'll bring that edge over to the top there, and it'll create that really nice line. Right? So you go back and forth here and bump out this shoulder if you want, right? And then this is always a fun step for making decoration, right? So the line that this sharp edge creates is really kind of nice, and I found a fun flare to that. So if I start on top and get the wheel going, with a little bit of speed, not too much. I can press in and down, and it'll create just a little bit of a line. So during a wood fire, like this will, you know, catch and pool all the ash and things like that. And we'll see how it turns out, right? So that's a section pot. All right, any questions? This is a section pot. This is your brain on section pots. All right.
Section part of it, it's too wide.
If it's
If
too,
small, I understand you just make it bigger, but if it's too wide,
yeah, it's back and forth. So
you can adjust it back and forth regardless if it's
Yeah.
wide or small.
yeah, so this bottom here, like if it was too wide, then this part up here, then I would just
Top
bring,
part would be too wide.
I could bring it in a little bit. So if the top part is too wide, I can bring the bottom out. So it's a total back and forth. Like this is still soft enough that I can shape. And yeah, so that's the trick, is keeping things soft enough that you can move things around. Right? So section
Can
pots,
you make the bottom and then cover it and come back a couple days later?
you can. Yep. Yeah. So if you make them separately, like if you make the bottom and the top today, you can cover them and then come back, put them in the fan and get them to the right consistency, like soft leather hard, real soft leather hard, and then can put them back on top. So, right, like if people want to try it, I suggest like 3 pounds. So 3 pounds and 3 pounds, or 4 pounds and 4 pounds, because that'll get you a real nice height with it. So even if you're just doing a cylinder, you don't have to shape this at all. It can just be a tall cylinder, right? That's how I used to make some vases, was just a tall cylinder. Then I could still fit my hand in that. So that's the catch. Yeah.
You make one without fitting in, like make it the top would be open enough that you can.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
Right. So, or you can, at this point, we have those wood spoons that you can use your wood spoon and press in and shape out. Right. So if this is, my spoon, it'll come down here and have a little bump so I can shape the shoulder. But yeah, everything should have your hand be able to fit it. Anything else? Cool. We'll stop the video here.